Wednesday, February 10th, and back into the snow and cold, about minus 10 degrees Celsius today, and pretty much been snowing most of the day. I'm going to have to get out here and shovel the driveway again, but we'll wait till the snow stops, then we'll have to shovel it again. And we're just making our way to the garage, taking the long way. It's my new truck. It's pretty long. That's why we have to take the long way to the garage, because I can't walk in the front of it anymore. It's right up tight to the garage door. So anyway, all right. Damn cold out. Poor TR3. Anyway, we'll get inside and get the heat turned on. So the first thing I need to do this afternoon is to put my welding helmet back together, and I've got some batteries for it. So these are 2025s. They are 3-volt batteries, so we'll see if we can get these reinstalled back inside the helmet. They go back in here, so we'll see if we can get those installed and get the helmet working properly so we can continue with our welding. Alright guys, where we left off on our last video, I'd just extended this rear valence metal to come out a little bit to extend the edge of this flange here that we're just about to put on. So you can see where I welded a piece in here because that piece was short. It also had a chunk out of it. If you recall from the last video, I had a big piece out of it around this area here. So we've welded that new piece in there. If you remember, this also had a crack up here, or a slice that someone had cut in here previously. So we've actually welded up that as well. So I've just created a template for a flange to be added on the side of this, so that's what that's going to look like. I do have to do some grinding still on the inside here, but anyway, that's what the flange will look like, something like that once that's repaired. And then we will work on the, get a better shot of it there, something like that. And we're going to do some repairs up the top here because it's pretty rusty here. Got lots of brazing here that we have to deal with, so I'm not sure what we're going to do there. But obviously there's a bit of a hole there, so we're going to repair the top of this flange after we fix the bottom piece first for some structure. So there's where we're at. After that, I believe we're going to have to probably look at the mating surfaces of the rear fender. I think that needs some work on it too. You can see that's just had some metal scabbed in here. So I believe that this flange on the rear of the fender also needs some work, and I think it's going to need to be sort of cut and pulled out and then re-welded, but we'll get there eventually. So let's get to fixing this flange first. Alright guys, just a quick shot of that bottom flange now just tacked in place. So we're going to do some Fender Fitment first before we weld that in solid. And obviously once we weld this in solid, then we're going to have to tackle the top part of this flange as well to fix this area up here. But anyway, we've got to start tacking that in, so that's looking pretty good. So we'll fit the fender up and see how we're doing. Alright guys, I'm not sure whether you're going to be able to see this very well or not, but here's where we are with the fender just fastened back up. And we just got some vice grips here on this taillight nacelle. Doesn't fit the greatest here. This is where I did some repairs before, so my shape of my taillight bucket might be a little bit off. We are going to fit the taillights into here to make sure they fit, but I'm pretty sure that they will fit the actual fender profiles. As when I took them off, I didn't notice any problems with them. But anyway, regardless of that, if you see up here, we've got a very tight gap because the two panels are butting up against each other. But as we go down, we get a progressively larger gap. And I think that has a lot to do with this fender flange here that's been replaced at some time. You can see how it's sort of, you know, the fender flange on the rear valence is fairly straight up and down, but if you look at the flange on the fender, you can see how it curves out and widens. So what I was thinking of doing is trying to slice this back in here and bringing this flange over and then welding it up. So again, sort of a cut and shut type idea just to widen this flange out. So Anyway, that's quite a bit, obviously, that I need to go here. I'm going to actually get some vice grips in there and clamp it flange to flange and see how much I can get it to tighten up with some pressure on the joints. But I know it's going to still be ugly back there, so it definitely needs some work. Anyway, we'll come back. I just wanted to give you a quick shot of that just before I welded this bottom up on the inner flange for the rear valence. But that looks pretty good, but the fender looks ugly. Anyway, we'll come back. And for comparison purposes, I thought I would just mount up the driver's side rear fender. And as you can see, the gap is much more consistent from top to bottom here. Obviously the fender's not bolted, it's just again clamped in here. So I think that will pull up okay. Remember, there's going to be a piece of beading that goes here, and actually there's going to be some body work done here as well. So I think we're going to be okay with this gap in the end. So just want to give you a quick look at that before we go back and start working on the passenger side. So I've pulled out my good fender. Obviously the red fender is the good fender, and as you can see, it's got the fender beading still attached to it. But I wanted you to see the profile of the red fender versus the uncoated or the stripped fender, and you can see how much wider of a curve that fender is than this one. This is very, very shallow. So what I'm thinking of doing is that blue line there, I think is going to be a cut line for me. So I'm going to cut inside the flange on the side, and again you can see this flange is not straight either. It's really wonky. So there's been a lot of work done on this rear fender. Anyway, I'm thinking of cutting that blue line and pulling that flange out to give it more of a curve. Pulling it out, fitting it up, and then welding it back shut to give it more of a pronounced curve and a little bit wider bottom on this fender. So anyway, that's what we're going to do, and we'll see if that works. Alright, so we made the initial cut on this fender here. You can see from top to bottom. However, I'm thinking I'm just going to go all the way to the bottom, and then we'll probably have to make some metal pieces to fab in there and bend them in and weld them in. But I think that's the correct course of action. I don't think I'm going to be able to fix this by just stretching this area. I might try it first, and then if that doesn't work, I can always cut through, detach the flange, and then build it back up. So anyway, we'll play around first before we actually make that final cut. So there's the initial cut as mentioned. So there's a look with the fender widened where it needs to be to fit the flange. Again, it's not fastened up to the flange, but you get the idea how that's going to close that gap up along the flange. So that's actually looking pretty good. So basically what I need to do is just make a strip of metal to fit in here and weld back in with the contour of this fender. I've got my bodywork hammer. I'm just going to sort of round off the edges of this little outside lip here so I can create a flange that's nice and smooth and flows across here, because it's got a bit of a rounded shape going to the outside of the fender. So I'm just going to pound this inner lip in just a little touch, and then we're going to weld in another piece of metal in here, and we'll fit it back up. But that looks pretty good where it's at, so we'll be careful not to disturb this when we remove the fender. And like I said, we'll weld a piece in there and fit it back up and see how it fits. Alright guys, we're making progress welding that new strip in the rear fender. I've done it in a couple of sections. I was concerned about the gap closing up, so I did the middle section first, and then we're doing the bottom and the top. So I've already got the bottom in, now we're just going to work on the top. So then we'll grind that down and see how we did. Looking good so far. Alright guys, there's the test fit up after the welding's been done on that rear flange, and I think that looks 100% better than it did. So I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll finish welding up that both the inner flange and the fender patch, and we'll grind that down, and then we'll come back with a final look of this. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that, I think. Alright guys, that repair is now finished. I have to say that I'm pretty happy with that. Can't really see where I put that piece of metal in. You can see it a little bit here on the inner flange, but I really haven't ground that down as much as I could, but it's going to get some filler over it anyway. Again, this is not bolted up, so it's just sitting there. I do have a pair of vice grips just holding the two flanges together on the inside, so I expect that this little gap here is going to be pulled a little tighter with a bolt location that's just right about there. So that should tighten that up a little bit on the top as well. So, and again, like I said, there's a piece of beading that goes in here, so you're not going to be able to see that anyway. So that is, I would think, 100% better than what it was. So whenever that happens, I'm happy. Alright, we'll move on to somewhere else. Alright, we've just taken the fender off again, and the reason we've done that is we're going to fix this area here. So all I'm going to basically do is cut out a small area and weld a new piece in there. Again, I've got this grazing to contend with, so it's going to be a little bit difficult for me to weld a patch back in there, but we'll deal with that when we get there. So we'll get the cutting wheel out, we'll cut this out first of all, make that repair, and hopefully all goes well. Alright guys, we've got a new little piece welded in there. I managed to weld around the brazing, which was not too bad actually. There was a piece that came down in the back that I was able to clean up and weld to, so it was a little easier than I anticipated. So anyway, that's done. It's very, very solid now, which is good. So I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work on the rest of the flange mounting points. So in order to do that, I'm going to do the old trick that I used before. I'm going to get a piece of strip caulking, and I'm just going to lay it on here. I'm going to mount the fender up, and I'm going to press the fender against the strip caulking to leave the impression of the nuts on the fender flange. So we'll see if that works or not. Here's the aforementioned strip caulking. This is what I'm using. Dum. Anyway, we'll mount the fender up and see if we can locate those holes. Alright, holes are located and drilled, so we'll see if we can fit the fender up and mount it up 100% at these locations. Hey, good evening guys, Tush coming at you. Just coming up to 7 p.m. on Thursday, February the 8th. And just back out in the garage after shoveling the driveway. Getting ready for more snow tomorrow. So that's out of the way, dinner's out of the way. So we are back working on the rear fender. And tonight we are going to work on fixing the rear fender flange on the passenger side, on the actual fender, and we're going to work on the flange on the body tub. So stay tuned, we'll be back. Alright guys, the top flange of the fender actually doesn't look too bad. There's fairly good metal. Obviously it was a yellow fender at one point in its life, so it's had a ton of work on it, but again, this flange doesn't look too bad with the exception of this area here. Looks like it's been repaired. Looks like a weld mark there. So anyway, we're going to cut this section out and put a new section in here. We're going to figure out whether this is required, this hole here, or not. Obviously at one point somebody didn't think it was required because there is no nut on the back of it, spire nut, whatever you want to call it, or Tinnerman nut, whatever you want to call it. So we'll check that. If it's not required, we may just cut this section out and we'll put a new one in there and get rid of that entirely. Other than that, it looks pretty good along this edge. The only other repair that I see needs to be happening is this flange here for the B-post, at the top of the B-post. So we've got a rusted away section, so we'll probably create a new repair section just for this little top corner as well. So that's it for those repairs. We still need to do a bit more repair on the bottom here. We need to weld a bottom edge with a lip on it. We just trimmed that short so we can get the fender to fit. We just need to reattach a piece there on the bottom and fold it over. So anyway, we're going to get to cutting out and repairing this flange first, and we're going to check, we're just going to hold the fender up against the car, like I said, make sure that that's not required. And just for fun, I thought I would throw the good TR4 fender up there just so you can see how far out of whack the mounting locations are on this fender underneath. So this is a stock fender that's never been touched. It's in very, very good condition. So technically this fender should bolt up right to the car, but obviously it won't if you look at the differences in the mounting locations. You can see they're pretty significant. They get farther apart as you go further back. It looks like this is the only original fastener location that actually lines up with this fender, which is kind of odd. Anyway, thought you might be interested in seeing that. So there's not even a hole here for this location. So anyway, just thought you want to see that. That's what I'm dealing with. Alright, I've confirmed the fastener locations, and this one is not required. So we are going to cut out and make a patch here and put some new metal in there. I also checked out the mounting locations and just marked where they lie. So these are good, these are good, these are good, this is good. Here I've got 1, 2, 3 extra holes that we'll have to weld up, so, and maybe some repair here. Looks like a little rust in there. So we'll probably have to do a bit of a repair there as well. So we'll fix that flange and weld those holes up, and we'll see what this comes up as when I get the wire brush up. Alright, we'll come back. Alright guys, we've got that patch welded in on this flange. I just made a little bit of a notch cut and welded that in. Sorry I didn't show that to you, but I'm sure you've seen me weld in enough patches of metal on this car. Anyway, we also did work on this flange a little bit here, so we've got the new flange put in. It's not finished yet. Still needs some repair up the top. It actually needs to roll up under this lip as well. So we're going to extend this up and under as per the good fenders, how the good fenders show. So this obviously ended here on this previous iteration of this because of this ugly patch that they put in this corner that I talked about in the previous video. Anyway, we'll work on that probably at a later time. We're going to go work on the flange now on the body tub, and I've got the wire wheel on the grinder, and we're going to go to town and get the rust off that flange and plug some holes. Alright guys, just coming up to 8:45, and we filled the holes that we didn't need, and we smoothed this out a little bit. I managed to fill a few other holes with some weld. It's not the straightest looking flange area in the world. Again, tons of brazing down here, as you can see. Anyway, it's a lot better than it was. I ground some Bondo out here, and below there you can see some brazing as well. Anyway, I think what we'll do now is we'll fit the fender up and see how we did, and that'll probably be it for the night. We'll come back with one last update. Alright guys, for anybody that's interested, here is the rear wing fitting kit. This one's from the Roadster factory. It's part number RFK 160, and there are the contents. Anybody knows what these little black things are? These little clips. I'm not sure where these little clips go, as they weren't on my car. So let me know if you know what those are. Any of you TR250 or TR4 guys, I know they're not on a TR6, so anyway, maybe it'll become apparent to me when I start fitting the fender up, but right now I'm drawing a blank on those. So anyway, so let's attach a fender. Alright, just after, or just coming up to 9:30, and trying to put these bolts in the top of the fenders, and they're not cooperating, and they are, if you have big hands like mine and you try to get up in under this lip to get those little bolts started in there, it is a total pain in the butt, and I don't have the patience to do that tonight. So we're going in for tonight. We're giving up. I did get the 3 bolts bolted down here, and like I said, I'm really happy with the way that turned out. So much better than it was. And anyway, we'll get back out here tomorrow, and we will continue to get this rear fender fitted up. I'm sure I'll have some more patience early tomorrow when I get home from work, and we'll give it another shot tomorrow. Alright, have a good night guys. Thanks for watching.